All right, in the interest of time, we're going to start with some logistics here. So we're going to start our international panel that is going to be moderated by Omar Costilla. I'll introduce him in a second. There's some messages about kind of like what's going to happen before, like during the panel.
Hello, everyone. I'm Guillermo Bernal, one of the organizers as well. I just wanted to share with you guys some resources, but first, make sure you have installed the app or you have access and logged in, because now we have access to some information from sponsors and resources and so on. And then I can send these messages and you will all get it. If you're like part of the conference and you have joined into the app, you will automatically get an email in that way. So so the app is on the top and you can just download it in Android or iPhone. And so if we go to the next slide, NVIDIA is providing a lot of resources. We know that we're trying to do AI research, but it's very computational heavy, and not everyone has a lot of GPUs laying around. So these are different programs that NVIDIA has that is allowing us to either you can join them and begin to partner with them or clusters. And you don't have to take a photo if you have the app. You will get all this. If we go to the next slide as well, these are more programs with their own links. Again, you will get all this information. We will try to send information for you guys, see how we can get resources, just since we know that it's a very expensive field if you don't have access to GPUs or resources. So partnering with a lot of these institutions is a big thing. Thank you.
All right, so please, again, download the app, get that information, because it's probably going to be shown during the panel. So we're going to start the international panel now. I want to welcome you, a good friend of mine, an incredible person, Omar Costilla-Reyes, please. Omar, he's going to be our moderator for today's panels, international panel. Omar Costilla, as you all know probably, he holds a research position here at MIT at the Brain and Cognitive Science Department. He's also main executive organizer of this event. So none of this could have happened without that, master brain. With obviously, so thank you. With obviously the help of, an amazing team of people and all the recording team that is here and that's helping us very kindly. So, of course, Omar has, accumulated a variety of awards. Among them, he actually has done several artificial intelligence models for biometrics recognition and identification, one based on gait recognition. He actually holds for that a very long-lasting sort of a high score on, basically he was undefeated on that specific challenge in terms of the algorithm predictive capacity that he has. So a very accomplished researcher, but also someone that I know will moderate this very well. So,
I have this microphone. Luis, tengo un micrófono y pon el timer también. So welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. It's great to have you all here. As I said at the beginning, I think this is an incredible opportunity for all the region to come together and discuss how artificial intelligence might be able to advance the society, the Latin American society for good. So that's why we're here. And thank you all for coming and be open to this conversation. Because I know it's hard to get everybody together. And I think that's something that we accomplish here, to really bring different minds from different countries doing different things, sectors, government, industry, and academia. Thank you. Thank you for being here. So this panel is a very international panel. We have people coming from Harvard, MIT, from Italy, somebody as well from Uruguay. And the reason for this panel is we want to discuss a global view on artificial intelligence and how we can take that view and apply it to AI and apply it to artificial intelligence in Latin America for the social good. So first we have Angélica Natera. Please come into stage. She's the executive director of Laspau, an organization affiliated with Harvard that has contributed to the education development of thousands of individuals in Latin America through scholarship programs and knowledge exchange opportunities. With over 30 years of professional experience, including 19 years at Harvard, she has worked on the design and management of education programs for public and private universities, government agencies, private companies, and non-profit organizations in Latin America. Thank you, Angélica, for joining us. So then we have Enzo. Please join us, Enzo. Enzo Fevre Cervini. He is an adjunct professor of digital governance at the University degli Studi della Tuscia. I hope I pronounced that right. He currently serves as senior expert at the Agency for Digital Italy, Presidency of the Council of Ministers, and coordinator of the thematic group on emerging technologies, AI, and blockchain of the OCDE, Working Party of Senior Digital Government Officials, e-leaders. Thank you, Enzo, for joining us today. Then we have Armando Solar-Lezama, which is a professor here at MIT at CSAIL, and one of our organizers here. So he has been championing us. He's our academic advisor for this initiative, and thanks to him, we made this possible, because it's not only about students, we also need support from faculty to be able to take these projects forward and move it forward. So thank you, Armando, for helping us. So Professor Armando has been a faculty member at MIT since 2008, where he leads the computer-aided programming group. He works at the intersection of programming systems and artificial intelligence. His group has done pioneering work in the area of program synthesis and neurosymbolic learning. In 2018, he was a visiting faculty member in the Facultad de Ciencias at UNAM. Before becoming a faculty member, he did his PhD at University of California at Berkeley, and before that, he completed an undergraduate degree and undergraduate degree in computer science and mathematics from Texas A&M University. Thank you, Armando, for joining us. So then we have Guillermo Anlló from UNESCO. Please join us. He is a regional program specialist, science, technology, and innovation policy specialist at UNESCO Montevideo. He currently serves as a senior program specialist, science and technology policy and capacity building at the UNESCO Regional Office for Science in Latin America and the Caribbean, based in Montevideo, Uruguay. In this position, he manages UNESCO's regional activities in the fields of science, technology, and innovation, policies, and STIs. He was Vice Minister of Technology and Innovation at the First Science, Technology, and Innovation Minister of the Buenos Aires province, Argentina. And previously, he was a researcher and professor at the Faculty of Economics at the University of Buenos Aires, Argentina. Thank you, Guillermo, for joining us from UNESCO. So UNESCO is one of our collaborators for this summit as well, and I thank Guillermo because I think he was one of the first contacts we had in Latin America, and he had experience with other groups that he has helped launch initiatives like this. So he really told us how to do it at the beginning, and thank you, Guillermo, for your help. And so last but not least, we have Rafael Grossman, Dr. Rafael Grossman. He's a healthcare futurist, technology and innovator, surgeon, and educator. Originally from Caracas, Venezuela, he holds an MD diploma from La Universidad Central de Venezuela. He's a surgery trained in Ann Arbor, Michigan, USA, a full-time general trauma laparoscopic, is that correct? And robotic surgeon in Maine, USA. Thank you, Rafael, for joining us. And so, as you're going to see today, we aim for this summit to be very diverse. And Rafael, he is from Venezuela. I think he's the first person that we're having on the stage from Venezuela, but we have some presentation later. So that's the reason we want all the region to get involved, and it's very important for us to have these discussions. But without further ado, I will start with Angélica. Please, you have 10 minutes to present
That's
what you
wonderful.
did, the great job you do at Laspau at Harvard. So please explain to the public.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the invitation and for the opportunity. And I have prepared some remarks. So in order to keep the 10 minutes, right, because I look forward to the discussion with all of you. And qué gusto saber that there is a Venezuelan also here. Thanks. Well, let me start. Never have universities faced more significant challenges and opportunities presented by advanced technologies. How students learn, how professors teach, how research is conducted, and how universities are managed are just a few of the disruptions taking place in higher education. Leading universities in the world, as we are right now at MIT, are experimenting with hundreds of transformative teaching methods. Laboratories are radically changing, taking advantage of artificial intelligence, big data, and collaborative networks to accelerate the generation of new knowledge. Digital platforms and social media están revolucionando the way universities are managed and the way services are provided. What we are experiencing today in this summit is a phenomenal example of the power of universities as engine of new ideas and innovation, and what we could see happening in Latin America. I wish I could see many Omars, many, like all of you in Latin America, and there is huge potential for that. The World Bank reports that by 2017, more than 20 million students were enrolled in 10,000 higher education institutions in Latin America and the Caribbean. That was great news for Latin America. Higher education enrollment went from 21% in year 2000 to 43% by year 2013, more than double. But with this growth, extraordinary challenges came to sustain the quality of education. I always say that universities in Latin America continue growing, but guess what? The budgets don't grow at the same pace. At Laspau, we're an affiliate of Harvard University. We focus on strengthening higher education across the Americas. That's the work we do. And therefore, we are aware of the multiple challenges universities face, especially public universities. For those who are part or have worked in public universities, you know how it is. Especially large class sizes, budget reductions, limited infrastructure, in addition to the economic and political challenges the country brings. Let's just remember what happened in the past 6 months in our region. At least 3-4 countries were all convoluted, right, in the past 6 months. So universities also have to deal with that. To address the challenges and opportunities technology brings, Laspau and Microsoft formed last year an alliance called Technological Frontiers, a comprehensive initiative to accelerate the adoption of technology in universities in order to transform education and research and ultimately empower researchers, professors, and students through institutional capacity building, which is key in this initiative, fortalecer las universidades. This is essential, and we'll keep working toward that. So the challenges and opportunities the fourth revolution brings to universities require now more than ever, as we are discussing here, collaboration from all sectors of society. And achieved, and this is what I would like to leave today with you, achieved in how we educate and what we teach our students in terms of knowledge and competencies. In addition to the fundamental aspects in terms of the disciplines, the workforce of the future needs to develop problem-solving skills, empathy, systemic thinking, digital competencies, among many others. For instance, the incorporation of robotics across disciplines now more than ever requires universities to teach liberal arts. Technology now allows us to accelerate and scale transformations oriented to strengthen universities' capacity to generate knowledge, to innovate, and become engines of social economic development. Es cierto that technology brings extraordinary opportunities to enhance and deepen learning, no doubt about it. But without the proper vision, visionary leaders, teaching mindset, and I'm so happy we have faculty here, clear learning outcomes, and a relevant educational model, these opportunities will jolt forth. In education, and this is my second message, before we try to teach machines to understand education, through artificial intelligence, We humans need to understand education. AI can't happen without HI. The Technological Frontiers Initiative, which we started at the end of last year, our first meeting was at University of Miami with the participation of 27 universities from 14 countries, will focus on developing universities' human capital in teaching research management using advanced technology and as an enabler, not as a replacer. The comprehensive approach will include short-term training programs, research exchange with labs in the US, webinars and scholarship opportunities for masters and PhDs, in programs in fields related to artificial intelligence and advanced technologies across disciplines. Our vision is to integrate decades of lessons learned from Laspau work on innovation in teaching and learning and in the creation of educational opportunities through scholarships with the power of technology and the advanced technologies, and that's what Microsoft also brings to the table, to leapfrog, dar el salto, para que las universidades den el salto to provide better education and ultimately advance sustainable development goals. Just yesterday, someone shared with me the MIT Technology Review for 2018 with the list of innovators under age 35 in Latin America. I'm above that age, by the way. We envision a Latin America with thousands of individuals under and above the age of 35 who are innovators.
Thank you. I think, yes.
We can have a discussion.
Yes, I think education, we have heard education everywhere. So it's very important for us. And I think your program is amazing on how we want to reach on the underserved regions of the world and provide this essential knowledge for people to go forward in life, right? Anyway, so let's go with Enzo. So Enzo, he has helped countries in Latin America to develop their national strategies. And I was just talking to him that it's important not only to have, isolated strategies. So something important to work as Latin Americans, as a region, is to cooperate, right? To find some common ground. I know it's difficult to work together because we have difference in culture, different language, different in so many things, right? So I think it's important to find common ground and see how we can cooperate, because artificial intelligence is very important, and I think maybe the only way we can really succeed at the adoption of this technology in Latin America is to cooperate. So Enzo, I'm glad that Enzo is here and he's going to explain us his vision on how we might be able to achieve that.
Thank you so much. You have the
Yep.
slide there. Thank you. So, and you mind I stand up because
Go for it.
I work in university and I'm peripatetic before anything. So thank you again. Thank you, Omar, for having us and me here. I'm getting here after 3 years working as the coordinator of the OECD thematic group on emerging technologies in the public sector. And we've been working around understanding how technology can be a tool to develop countries and develop especially the public administration. And here I remind myself every time that I start a presentation that of those very basic values that are reflected in this sentence. That is, technology is capable of doing great things, but it doesn't want to do great things. Technology doesn't want to do anything. So it depends on us, and this is a reminder on the understanding that technology needs to be human-centric because it responds to the needs of humans. And this is, I think, the core and essential core of the work that we are launching here with understanding where we need to go next. So my basic principle in participating here was really understanding how those 200 and more minds that are collectively working here today and yesterday and tomorrow might layer the basic foundations for something that is a bit bigger, I would say, forward-looking, which is maybe the setup of some ideas, some thoughts on how Latin America can have its own regulatory momentum on artificial intelligence, not to regulate it, but to regulate how we make it developed. So this is the state of the art. In September 2019, we actually published with the OECD a working paper on the state of the art in the use of emerging technologies in the public sector. This was a work that, trust me, it was years of work just to get few information by states. The majority of the information is very hard to be collected because actually the right hand of the state doesn't know what the left hand of the state. But actually, normally, is the thumb of hands of a state doesn't know what the other fingers are doing. Okay, so even there is a gap in information in the same organization of a state. So understanding what is the capacity of sharing information across the whole layers of government is sometimes really impossible. But what we have here is that you have an entire zone of the world that actually has advanced a lot. This very map is done on the 2nd of November 2019. So Argentina was still on the forthcoming part of the thing. But as you see, Latin America is a bit left aside. So you have, as Africa is one of the latest continents in trying to transform itself into a digital country, and especially into having something that is dedicated to artificial intelligence. But what is true is that there are some things that actually have been evolving very rapidly, and one of those is the fact that we have, for example, in Uruguay and in Argentina, specific indicators and strategies on how to go forward specifically in the public sector. And let me start afterwards why this is so important. So out of the state-of-the-art report, one of the things that we matched into what can government do in terms of strengthening national capacities for artificial intelligence is those 4 main domains. So what we can ask to states, this is it. So we can ask governments to be conveners of these 4 ELICA, so is academia, industry, civil society, and government itself. We can ask government to finance part of it. But this is part of something that goes in something very more specific, that is, we can ask governments to be direct users, but as well co-developers of AI solutions. And as well, one of the things that has been emerging a lot in the conversations today and yesterday is the fact that we are sometimes asking so much government to regulate something. And we will see what we can ask government to regulate. Of course, one of the challenges we are speaking today, and I think this is why we are all here as well, is the fact that we need to keep on fighting to sustain the sustainability process towards the SDGs. So it's a lot of sustainability in the process to get to be sustainable. And one of those things is that we can advance in this thanks to AI. Because one of the things that we have is that we cannot wait to be all mature in order to start over. We have actually to bridge the gap that we have already with some of the forward countries thanks to technology. And on this, artificial intelligence can be of great help. One of the examples that we've been finding are Promethea, that was just presented this morning in Argentina, that is not just an example of how this has been created inside the public sector. So this is quite unique, honestly, at world level. So having an artificial intelligence developed inside the justice system of a government, but as well is something that is easily conceivable into other countries. Colombia took it over. Italy is exploring the idea to take it over. So it's not just the capacity of exploring things inside the region, but as well being able to export ideas. Uruguay, the same, started developing, thanks to Italy and Canada, its own artificial intelligence strategy that was actually focusing on 4 basic layers. That is the identification of their local ecosystem, one thing that is sometimes very missing, the developing of a governance framework, and governance is an issue in the field of emerging technologies today. Ensures transparency and the use of explainable AI. Italy took a very forward-looking step in presenting its own white paper on the use of AI in the public sector already 3 years ago, that mandated the fact that no black boxes are to be used inside government or for government services, because actually this goes against the constitutional capacity of explaining citizens how decisions by government are made. And this is a valuable thing that then was exported already into the European framework. So what do we have here? Understanding one of the conversations that we had yesterday in the afternoon was exactly thinking about interoperability. And here we have the 12 principles of interoperability in Europe that can be a guideline. In a way, I told them about, can we learn from others? Can we understand whether administrative simplification, preservation of information, security and privacy, technological neutrality and data portability are some things that are extremely valuable and might be the layer foundation for something that we bring forward at regional level. And the same goes for the European guidelines on trustworthy AI that were mentioned yesterday at the keynote presentation, really at the beginning of the morning, where we have 7 basic principles on human agency and oversight, technical robustness and safety, privacy and data governance, transparency, diversity, societal and environmental well-being, and accountability, being those the core foundation of how we want to develop AI. And this goes into the fact that if we bring back to the idea of the SDGs, here technology can be a real driver for us to bridge the gap that we have right now. As always, data has a better idea. The point is that we have to focus on data governance. We have to focus on understanding how valuable are data, how we have to produce data that are trustworthy themselves in order for technology to be trustworthy. Understanding the fact that biased technology based on biased data might lead us to very wrong decisions is pivotal. And as well, understanding the code of ethical behavior in technology. One of the things that we have to explore, and I keep on saying this, is that I don't want to have an ethical regulation of technology, because this is wrong. I want to have an ethical regulation of the products of technology. Because putting limits to something that we don't know where it is going is exactly blocking something that we don't know. And you cannot ask to governments to block something that doesn't exist. In a way, it's controversial in its own sense. We need to change. We need to change the way we work. We cannot respond to technologies 4.0s with ideas and systems that are 1.0. Okay? This is extremely important. Are we ready to join forces and build a road that could lead us to a regional strategy on AI? This is something that I'm asking you today, but you have to respond. I don't think is us giving us good advices. Is us giving few ideas, but having you responding to that. Very lastly, one example. Mario Adaro, I don't know whether he's here, but he took me to Mendoza by horse and donkey to have a presentation on how Mendoza needed to have a digital and AI local strategy. And this is the way we can go. I mean, we have to use the means that we have in order to go forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Enzo. Thank you. So, yes, so as you have seen, we have sustainable development goals at the center of AI. And as Enzo mentioned, we want to focus the technology in the impact, right? So at MIT, we focus on research and we focus on applications as well. But the summit on itself is to have a positive impact in the region. And thank you, Enzo. It's important also the regional cooperation, but we can go over that once we are done with the presentation. So let's now give some time to Armando. So Armando, he is from Mexico, and he has a story going from, he grew up in Mexico, and then he went to the United States, and he obtained his, all his degrees, undergrad, PhD here, and now he's a professor at MIT, and he has experience in both sides. He has been teaching in Mexico at UNAM for some time, and now he has been in CSAIL for some time as well. So I think he has a very good overview of what's happening on the two sides, right? So I think it will be very helpful for us to understand what he thinks on what are the differences and how an institution like MIT and CSAIL we can learn from them, how they do research, how we can progress education, or anything that the region might be able to learn from these two sides of the coin that Armando knows. But Armando, if you want to explain, please.
Sure, thanks. So yeah, so I was actually born and raised in Mexico, and then one day in 1997, my parents came and said, "Oh, by the way, we're moving to the U.S." So you know, it was shocking to say the least. But I've basically lived here ever since, except for a short stint I spent last year, or I guess the year before that, teaching at UNAM in Mexico City. But it's actually been really interesting. When we moved to the U.S., we moved right next to a college town in Texas called Texas A&M. Mm-hmm. And you know, pretty much since then, I have lived right next to a major university my whole life. I went straight from a bachelor's to my PhD, and I went straight from that to being a professor. So, you know, don't ask me anything about the real world for the most part. But I feel like when it comes to academia, I know a thing or two about it. And I think one of the things that is really striking is the extent to which universities, and I think especially in the US, have been a real engine in developing a lot of the technologies and really developing a lot of the industries that are the economic engines of today, right? It's a little bit shocking that, you know, companies that started in dormitories, Google started by graduate students at Stanford, and Google is now worth more than Exxon and Shell and BP combined, right? It gives you a sense of the economic scale that the kind of work and the kind of industries that can be born out of research can have. And yesterday we saw some statistics about the kind of economic impact, for example, that MIT has had in the US. And yet, when you're on the inside and when you're in the university, one of the things that I find really striking is, despite the fact that MIT plays such a crucial role in the economy and in the development of these new industries, when you're inside, it doesn't feel like you're in the middle of a major economic engine, right? The culture and the environment is really centered around science, innovation, and education. And so I think there is this very interesting paradox that how an institution that is so profoundly committed to science, innovation, and education, and where the primary mission is really, not so much about, oh, we're going to go and start companies and we're going to go and create industries, but really we're going to discover knowledge and we're going to form people. How do you actually have that play such an important role in an economy? And I think there's a few aspects of the university system as a whole in the US that is very conducive to that. I think, I mentioned before that universities have certainly been an engine, but we don't go driving around in engines, right? An engine is certainly a crucial part of the vehicle, but the engine needs to be part of a whole system that is able to take those developments and to take those ideas and to take that innovation and to actually turn it into new industries, into new companies. And that is a process that academics certainly play an important role, but not the only role. And I think in particular, one of the things that makes possible this particular feature of the system is the very tight relationship between research and education. And I think it's something that is very, very powerful because it allows you to bridge this potential divide between the goals of the academic and the goals of science and the goals of advancing knowledge on the one hand, while at the same time having this enormous economic impact. If you look at the numbers, for example, of companies that have come out of MIT, it's pretty remarkable. But one of the things that is often not noticed is that, for the most part, these companies are not, some professor who was working in the lab and then, went and kept pushing the technology and turned it into the product. A lot of these companies are really the students, right? Because the students are really the ones that are in a position where, they don't have a job yet, they don't have family responsibilities, they are really at the stage where they can go out and push and really do the work that it takes from taking a clever idea, taking a clever prototype, and turning it into real innovation, into real solutions that people can use. It's very hard for an idea to jump directly from research prototype and in the lab to a product that many people use. And so having that ecosystem of people who are right there when the technology is being created, right? The students who are not just going and taking the classes, but really involved in the labs and in the research and absorbing those ideas and looking at that potential and taking that either to startup companies or to existing companies. So that is a really crucial ingredient. I think another very important ingredient is this emphasis on innovation and science, even at a place like MIT that prides itself on having real impact in the world and prides itself on pushing ideas beyond simply demonstrating the idea, but pushing ideas to the point where they work and they're changing the world. The primary commitment is still to science and innovation. And what that means is that when you have companies that come out of here, these are not just companies that have a minor tweak on an existing on an existing process. These are not just ideas that are going to have to go out and elbow their way into a crowded marketplace. These are really companies that are able to go in, start in a place where there might not be a lot of competition, where they're able to start small and grow, and actually get to the point where these ideas become an industry. And finally, I think one of the things that is very powerful about the system is, a system like this could not exist without a very strong public commitment to financing research and education, right? MIT is nominally a private institution and has a big endowment from donations from that have accumulated over a century of philanthropy. And yet, a place like MIT and the kind of things that we do at MIT could not exist without very strong federal support for the kind of basic research that is not going to lead to a breakthrough tomorrow or the day after, but that might take a decade before it's really at the point where private industry is interested. So when we, in the research area that I work with, and I'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow, today, it's an area that has very strong interest from industry. We have alumni from our group working at many of the major tech companies, starting companies of their own. But when we started, this was an area that really very few people in industry could see any potential in it. And it was really thanks to the kind of long-term support that only governments can provide, that the technology was able to mature to get to the point where you actually have useful technology. And so I think, these are some of the things that we really need to think about. How do we replicate them across Latin America? And how do we create these kind of ecosystems that can lead to this kind of development?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Armando. I think I couldn't summarize MIT better than that. But I think it's a special place because nobody here feels that they're special, I think. It's a very open culture that helps each other. Of course, we have more resources. The best people in the world is here. But still, I think that the ecosystem surrounding MIT can be something that we can inspire from in Latin America to build something like that. For example, for myself, I can make an appointment to the president. I mean, maybe he cannot receive me tomorrow, but maybe in 2 months, in 1 month. I don't know if that's possible in Latin America, that somebody that is not a professor or somebody, a student, can go and talk to the president, right? So it's something, the environment that we need to learn. And so I meet with the president, and then I explain what I want, and then he understands how I think, and then he can use that knowledge to build new programs or new things. So those are the things that we need to enable, and I don't think it's easily happening in Latin America. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so let's go now with Guillermo. So Guillermo, he is from the UNESCO Latin American office, and I was very glad to be with him in 70 years that they had a meeting in November, right? Yes? December, yes. So it was my first visit to Uruguay, and I was very fortunate to also to meet the Director General of UNESCO that couldn't make it today, but thank you for the invitation there to the 70 years. And it was great for me to understand how the office has been pushing science and technology in Latin America, right? So just think about 70 years in Latin America of a science and technology office, right? So I think that the experience that they have accumulated we can learn from that, and we can reflect on what the office has been doing, and then take that knowledge to push the next frontier. So I would like Guillermo to tell us about UNESCO and how we can use UNESCO experience in Latin America to maybe integrate AI as well.
Thanks, Omar, and many thanks for everyone here. So let me travel to the past, to the 1.0 era that Enzo mentioned. And we have to think at the end of the Second World War, we have the big concern of the people was to having another war. So two United Nations big institutions was born in that era. One was gathered by the governments, that is the United Nations itself. The other one was led by the intellectuals of the world, that was UNESCO. And the concerns of these intellectuals was that the war was created in the mind of people. So we have to try to change the mind of people in order to get peace. Mm-hmm. And that is the motto of UNESCO. That's why we deal with education, culture, and science. UNESCO means that, United Nations for Education, Science, and Culture Organization. Since that, very close to that day, some scientists from the regions were concerned of how to gather and to bring science to the region. They feel like the institutionality of science is something that we have to build up. We already have scientists there, but they don't work together. So that was the first UNESCO office outside Paris in Latin America. And that was the origin of Montevideo office, that is a regional office for science. Now, I think that the big concern of the population is sustainability. That's why we have the 2030 Agenda and the 17th Sustainable and Development Goals. So UNESCO now is working on that, how to support this new challenge to sustain peace, but we need to sustain sustainability. In that sense, I believe very strongly in artificial intelligence because, you know, it's not, we don't have to talk about 17 goals. We have to talk about one agenda for one world. You know, the agenda is built up between 5 P's. One planet for the people in prosperity. And to obtain that, you need peace and partnerships. So you have to work in these 17 goals at the same time. And artificial intelligence, it's a technology platform. It's a technology platform that allowed you to do a lot of things. What means that? You have technologies in energy. You have technology in transgenics, for instance. A platform technology is something that enhances these other technologies, that enhances these other areas of life, that it's embedded in everything. That's why the dean yesterday said that here you have to be bilingual. You are having computing in your field of study. You're not having biology or energy. That's the big issue. And I think that AI, it's enabled to target and to work in this 2030 agenda in a joint work and doing a common work, targeting all at the same time. Saying that, now from our office we are very strong committed with the right to science. You know, it's one of the main rights in the human declarations of human rights, but it's one that is in some sense forgotten. Every person has the right to benefit from the advance of science. And that means that we have to work that every people in the region could access to these improvements. And the first step, I think, and this is, and that's why we support this initiative, and we are very grateful from you and your team to do that, is we have to bring up the awareness in government that they need to think in this. And I think we can see the map few minutes ago. You see, it was a gray area in Latin America. We need to start from there. And like the keynote this morning says, the awareness is the first step in policy makers. Then we have to start building a roadmap, because this is a process. This isn't a issue that we can solve it because we have the solution in the desk. We have to build up a roadmap to follow up, like Enzo was saying, to help different countries and to help the region itself to have a roadmap. And these kind of events are in that sense. Let me pass a little advice. We are supporting the Open Science Forum for Latin American countries. We're going to have the 3rd edition this year in Argentina. In 2018 was in Panama, and one of the main issues was biotechnology. But one of the main issues for the next one, in this September, is going to be artificial intelligence. So what we are supporting these events, because we want to open minds of the people, of the stakeholders, of the governments, that these are the technologies that could allow us to commit the SDGs and the 2030 agenda.
Okay. Thank you, Guillermo. So going into the Sustainable Development Goals, one of the goals is health. And we are very pleased to have Rafael Grossman from, he's from Venezuela now, he lives here. And so what's impressive about him is that he's a technologist. So I don't know if you know what Magic Leap is, but it's just an augmented reality headset. And he has embraced technology to do his everyday work as a surgeon. So we have him here so you can see how technology can transform healthcare. And I hope that can serve as an inspiration for doctors in Latin America or in underserved regions on what technology can do. So
thank you, Omar.
Please.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm a little bit of a last-minute addition to the panel, but I'm very humbled and really honored to share the stage with you and to be able to talk to you and to share my message. Hopefully my slides, which were also organized very quickly, are somewhat explanatory of what my message is and my passion is. So I'm a surgeon. I'm a general surgeon. That's what I do. I went to med school in Venezuela, came to the US and trained, and went back to Venezuela, and unfortunately had to come back to the US. Unfortunately, you know what I mean, for different reasons, but I've had I would say a very rewarding and great life with many opportunities here that I couldn't have had probably anywhere else. So as a surgeon, I'm a healer, I'm an educator as well. My passion is my patients. But nothing of what I can do without the help of technology. So technology enables us to be humans as we conceive humans today. I'm very active in social media, and once I was able to get this pilot going using mobile devices after the iPhone 4 came out. With FaceTime, we used the iPod Touch devices to connect trauma clinics all throughout Maine, which is a very rural area. It's very similar to Latin America in a way, but in the US. So that caught up the attention of some TED people, and I did a TEDx talk, and then I thought, wow, what an incredible potential to have a platform like TED. To share a message. So I started doing that, and I became sort of an influencer and an advisor, a consultant, a keynote speaker, and basically a resource, throwing me out there to try to make education and make healthcare better through the use of technology. Someone was mentioning it's not the technology, right? It's the use, the smart use, the kind use, the compassionate use of technology to change how we do healthcare, how we do education. And when we talk about healthcare, we always understand what that is, but really, healthcare doesn't exist in most places. It's really sick care what we do, because we treat disease, we immunize against diseases, but we don't go to the root of preventing diseases. And that brings me to the map that you showed where you know, Africa and Latin America mostly is sort of at the same level. And when we are such an incredible a golden pot of human resources, of youth, of intelligence, of human intelligence, and we are there, and I really think that communicating the message, organizing summits like this, connecting us, enabling the change that Latin America needs, that is very, very important. Briefly, I'm going to go through some slides in here. Like I said, I'm in Twitter, and I have a blog where I share a lot of free, really non-commercial information for students and for patients about healthcare and technology together, and how one can enable each other. You know, healthcare, you know, sick care that we do today is a basic human right. That brings us to the SDG that we are addressing here. But really, we don't see it as a human right. It's always a political tool. In the time of elections, everyone is like a paladin of healthcare. Healthcare is seen as a business opportunity, you know. But healthcare is a basic human right, as any of the other human rights that we all understand. And that's where we need to come from. That is the main thing. And one of the issues in healthcare is how chaotic it is. How is it possible that healthcare today in 2020 is in the state that it is? And I think that the problem, the main issue with that is that we have lost a human connection. We have lost human connection and human connectivity, and I think that's where technology can really, you know, make things much better. And not technology, but the smart use, the kind and compassionate use of technology, creating innovation, creating disruption. The creative disruption of technology, of medicine, as you have maybe heard that phrase. You know, once Nicolás Negroponte, one of the founders of the MIT Media Lab, he came to Venezuela, and after a day in Venezuela, this is a story that my brother told me, he said, wow, you Venezuelans you have a healthy disrespect for authority. I said, exactly, you know, that's what we all need. We need a healthy disrespect for authority to be able to change paradigms, to be able to do things differently. Technology evolves exponentially. Now, this is a little GIF I did in there, but so we went from MOS to graphic user interfaces to the touch interfaces to now spatial computing, where we can use a Magic Leap device, or we can use a HoloLens device and compute in the space in ways that we could never do before. So we are at a stage right now where, you know, we are in a perfect storm setting in humanity's history to really enable change. And we have the perfect setting to enable that change in Latin America, because we don't have anything in general. We lack a lot of things. It's a fertile ground. We have a lot of problems. You know, necessity is the mother of invention. We have that in Venezuela and in all the Latin American countries, as in many other areas of the world, but focusing on Latin America, we have that. You know, how is it possible that 5 billion people, according to the Lancet Global Health Report a few years ago, 5 billion people in the world don't have access to safe or affordable surgery? How is it possible that we need 2.2 million surgeons, anesthetists, and obstetricians in the world today, when we have such countries with GDP, companies like Google or Amazon? How is that possible that there's so much inequality? And those are questions that we all really need to bring in our minds, and try to not just think about them, but try to enable change to answer those questions. We come to the sustainable goals, and then the most important one for me, at least, or the one where I can more contribute is health. You know, again, healthcare is a human right? And I see that healthcare today, you know, in the United States, up to about maybe 15, 20 years ago, healthcare was done in a very direct way, in a very analog way, right? Then we came up with digital health and EMRs, or electronic medical records, electronic health records. We have changed in a way the healthcare, how healthcare is done in the United States. Everything is computerized and digitalized, and now we have one of the worst healthcare in the U.S. at the level of developed countries. The U.S. ranks, you know, in the 20th some place, despite $3.3 trillion a year spent in healthcare in the US, we rank that high. Why is that? Because we have not focused on how to do human and digital technology together. When we talk about AI and we don't add the human AI factor, then it doesn't work. So, you know, when I go see a patient in clinic or wherever I see a patient, I immediately, you know, go this way, I start typing, populating the medical record, patient is over there and I'm over there. So I'm using technology and I'm digitalizing all this information, which is great because imagine, I can't remember who in the prior forum in Argentina, I think it was Juan, that big room with all those records in there, all in paper, how do you analyze that? That's how healthcare is in most of the world, but that's how it was in the US 20 years ago. Now by federal mandate, you have to put everything in the computer. So you have all that incredible amount of data in a little chip, right, in a computer, and then you don't know what to do with that data. So now we have sensors, we have wearables, we have, you know, devices like our smartphones, like devices that can fit in the palm of your hand that can check an EKG or oxygen saturation or whether your heart rhythm is regular or not. A number of things that can provide data. We have the ways to analyze the data. We have GPUs that are, you know, infinite almost. But then we are not using that capability to come up with answers. That's where AI, you know, artificial intelligence, augmented intelligence comes on. Now we are at a time when we have all the right factors in this equation together, and AI can really help us really finally make the changes happening. So I think that it is really important that in this summit, in this meeting, we get to know each other, we stay connected, and then we enable change. We are at a point where we have, again, all the technology. We need to add the clever, kind, and compassionate use of that technology to have real, factual change in our region. I think that you know, we can certainly become better humans. We can have better societies if we do so. I think that in reality, the status of artificial intelligence algorithms today need to and must, in a way, change how we do things, and especially how we do healthcare and how we do education. We are forming the regulatory framework. We are forming the economic framework. We need to establish the infrastructure to do this. Thinking about how to do AI in Latin America, and we have people with no water, or no electricity, or no toilets. So we need to somehow collaborate. And just like some countries in the world are all in blue, in Latin America we have a few countries, you know, Uruguay, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, that can be hubs for knowledge, for help, for assistance, and not everyone has to reinvent the wheel. We can all work together and create a nice consortium, in a way, of change that can be a model, a role model for the rest of the world. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rafael. So I think, as Rafael mentions, I think the central idea of cooperation is not to repeat things. Well, we don't have the resources, right? Who has extra resources in Latin America, right? We don't have money. We don't have skills. We don't have people with the right skills. So what should we do? So that's why we're putting on the table why cooperation is important. Mm-hmm. And my final question to each panelist, before, if we have time to questions from you, please start thinking and then just line up on the microphones and we'll try to address those. So my final questions for each one of you is, how do you think we can succeed in making AI as a topic of cooperation in Latin America? How can we use technology as a way to incentivize governments and industry and also the education sector to cooperate in this important endeavor? So I will start with you, Angélica.
You know, and I was reflecting also on other questions that you shared before this session. And from Laspau, we strongly believe on the transformational power of education. So if we use education as an diagonal or orthogonal, you know, transversal, that goes across all disciplines, then we will enable the next generations to solve the challenges that we are not able to solve in health, in environment, in government. And nowadays, what is beautiful about technology is that allows at a lower cost do things that we were never thought we were able to do before. So if we, and that's why from Laspau, focusing on making universities stronger, right? And making sure that students in Latin America, independently of their socioeconomic class, independent if you can go to a public or a private university, can have high quality education and benefit from inspirational, examples across the world, so they can develop their own strategies that are pertinent or relevant to their context. So I think from my view, and representing the organization I direct, it's education. I would say that.
Thank you. What about you, Enzo? What do you think?
I will stick to education, but not university education. I want much more attention to primary education that reflects a better environment for kids to be able to empower themselves in thinking that they can do something different, that their life can change. And this is one of the things that I've been focusing the most. I've been living for many years in Africa in my life and in conflict zones. And trust me, I think that the power of basic education is the way. Of course, it's a long-term process. Mm-hmm. But if there is something that I've been experiencing in my life, being half Argentinian, is that since I was born till today, I think that in the majority of the situations that I've experienced, the level of basic education has been actually going down rather than going up. Mm-hmm. This is for political reasons, but because we are not spending a lot on education. So I think that overall, you're right that we need to expand on higher education and universities, but I've seen and actually I work with amazing professors from Latin American universities. So I think that we still have something there, and actually something extremely good. Mm-hmm. Might not be English speaking, okay? It's Spanish speaking, and this is another big gap that we have. Is as for the English, as for the Anglo-Saxon work, not willing to speak a second language, the same goes for the Spanish ones, and this actually cuts a lot of cultural capacities for cross alimentation of things and interoperability of minds. Mm-hmm. But I will go for basic education.
Armando?
Well, I think this has been a long-running question of how do we translate this common heritage and this common culture that we have across Latin America into common action. And I think traditionally the problem has been that each of our government has been dysfunctional in its own way. No offense to the government people here. But I think information technology in particular gives us an opportunity to transcend some of those local problems and some of the problems with bureaucracy that have traditionally hampered integration, to really, at the grassroots level, start building this common ecosystem and this common culture of resources, of learning materials that can allow us to actually build a common Latin American ecosystem for artificial intelligence and computer science more broadly. Because I think there is a big opportunity there to build our own ecosystem, separate, even if it's interrelated with the one in China, with the one in the US, that is really catered to our local needs and to our local problems.
Thank you. Guillermo, please.
Yes, for sure, I agree with the idea of basic education. We are committed with that. I totally convinced that science education is well related with this right to science, and then that starts in basic education. We need our child to earn scientific thinking. Saying that, let me jump to science policy. Science policy is something that, science doesn't believe in frontiers. And you do science anywhere. And science is becoming more and more an expensive activity because of the scales. Science it has a high economic scales. And I think that no country in the region itself could afford this kind of challenge, could compete with Google, let's say. How much R&D Google spend is not the same amount that any country alone are spending in all kind of research that it's doing in this country. So I think that we need this kind of institutions in the region, joint institutions of countries, in order to try to have build up opportunities to guys like you from the region, from being here, so being there. Because in some sense, now a scientist is a commodity that move through the countries, move where they have the conditions to do it. So first we have to build up in the region these facilities to have these human resources coming back to the region. The second challenge is to build up an agenda, to build up a common agenda, a strong common agenda. And if we don't commit the goal to bring you back, at least we have to deal with you to put in your research agenda our challenges.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Guillermo. And Rafael, maybe from the healthcare point of view, maybe you have some.
Yeah, obviously the obvious answer is education, like we all said. Education at every level, not basic, not secondary, not. We have to hit them all with all we got. And how do we do that when people in Latin America, in many areas, can't even go to school to learn how to read? How do you teach them coding? And how do you teach them? I mean, they don't have a toilet. How do they connect to the internet? Yeah. It's such a complex problem. But again, I think it all starts here and repeating and reverberating the message and repeating this conference, not here only, but there, and connecting people and networking people where the inequality, in a way, in every sense, but the inequality of the ones who do have and don't have, not just material, but intellectual resources, fuses in sort of one big ecosystem, one big body, and we get the people who maybe come here and study and don't go back, or come here and then live here and then maybe do a little bit of stuff in there in Latin America. We have the capabilities. Again, technology has connected all of us, and we have ways to you can be whatever you are, and if you have a internet connectivity, you can just take a MOOC and learn about Python or TensorFlow or whatever. So I think that again is the golden age of humanity if we know how to use it, and I think that AI can really put all this data, all these parameters together in a way and give us an important and a good answer.
Thank you, Rafael. Any questions so far?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question. Thank you very much. It's an open question, but perhaps the professor could illustrate a bit more. Do you see industry-university relationships changing in the field of artificial intelligence? I mean, the linear model, Vannevar Bush, 1940s, might have worked well in the post-war period here in the US. But right now, for advancing the field of artificial intelligence, it's not only a good science what you need, but also you need data. Companies have data. You need a lot of computing power. Company has the computing power. So maybe the balance is shifting off, and we need to explore different ways of engaging, especially since there's an increasing specialization between what universities do, basic research, and what companies are doing, advanced research. But the interface for advancing the field of AI is somewhere in between. So are you thinking of different models of engagement, or perhaps this transfer of technology is really a two-way street, but now it's more what universities might benefit from private industry than what it used to be, the contributions that universities were doing?
So I think this engagement is certainly very important. And even though a lot of the research that we do is very basic research, we have very deep engagement with companies like Intel, like Toyota, like IBM, and it's not just a one-way street. We learn from the problems they have. We learn from the very good people that they have at some of these very large companies. And we also benefit from the kind of resources, computing resources, data resources that they're able to bring to the table. I think what is important with these kind of relationships, regardless of the model that you follow, is that everybody involved is very clear that the role of this kind of engagement is not for the company to outsource its development, but rather to innovate, to really explore new ideas that might not pay off in the next year or 2 years or 5 years, to explore new ideas that might be far from where the company is right now, but that actually have the potential to be transformative. I think it's very important. And when these relationships work well is when everybody is aware that this is a research partnership, because that's really what we know how to do. There's very little beyond doing good research that we actually know how to do at the university level. And so you really want to leverage that.
If I may add something on this, I think that there are also coming on new methodologies of governments to inspire innovative procurement, for example. And those respond a lot to the fact that you're actually creating a new ecosystem between industry and university and startups into generating a response for something that is badly needed from the side of government. And this is something that is quite unique and is actually changing the way also big companies are working with startups and small research teams in universities.
And I would like to add to that, and thank you, Enzo, for bringing the government, the importance of having incentives from the government, having policies that incentivize this type of engagement. Colombia recently launched this program with the World Bank, right, that essentially focus on creating ecosystems of innovation, where you have a university, a public university, a less developed university or in process of, and a private sector. But there is an incentive from the government, and of course, having the World Bank behind pushing. Also, Ingeniería 2030 in Chile, it's a great example of that, right? Trying to sort of generate this ecosystem that foster innovation and entrepreneurship.
Is
I thought he was asking.
For sure, the relationship is changing because the situation is changing. Our social relationships are changing because of this technology. It's not only the relationship between industry and universities. The university has to rethought how they are going to build up in many sense. They have to rethought the careers, they have to rethought the researchers, what they are looking for in this society, new society. But I was thinking in what you say about data. That is a big space for regulation, for public regulation. Who owns the data is a main issue. It's a key issue. And most of that data is public data. I'm thinking in health. For me, the big breakthrough in the future, in the near future, is in health, for sure. Excellent. Because there we are going to see the converge of biotechnology, nanotechnology, and this kind of ICT technologies. It's not only artificial intelligence. And it's changing from sick care to health care. Mm-hmm. These monitor things are going to see this way. We're going to have these chips inside, and you're going to receive the phone call of your health insurance company saying, you have to come here to see something. And not the other way around, that you have to feel bad to go there. It's going to be a big, huge change. But who owns that data? Who's going to put it on the table? That's a big issue in this sense. And that's governments has to be involved in these discussions. But to be involved in that has to comprehend what means this technology.
Yes, thank you. Enrique Dascanton from Argentina. Rafael, outstanding presentation. Given the huge disparities we have in Latin America regarding healthcare, what would you think would be the most important step to be done to incorporate artificial intelligence in the healthcare and make it available to the majority of people, given a strong equalizing effect regarding access to healthcare and elevation of the media of the level of the professionals?
That's a big question, huh? Well, I'd say I have to, go into the root of things. I think infrastructure, but I wanted to say connectivity. There's no way that any one country can do it alone. I think that, in Latin America, anywhere, but in Latin America, we have to follow the steps, we have to connect and help each other. There's no other way we can do it because there's too much competition out there between the private and the non-private industry, and everyone is trying to make a buck creating the latest app or latest gadget or the fancy thing. We need to use that technology to help people, to not do sick care, but health care. And when we have all this data available and, have the ability to have an AI algorithm, analyze and give us the right answers, preventive answers or curative answers or rehabilitation answers in regards to healthcare, right? I think that the only way to do it in Latin America is, connecting each other, helping each other, enabling each other, coming up with real solutions each other, like the ones that Laura was mentioning. But it's such a complex picture because without infrastructure, we can't do anything, right? If you don't have electricity, again, how do you, you have to travel to a health clinic, I guess, and have the latest, there's so many ways to use telemedicine to connect better, right? It's not telemedicine. I always say it's not telemedicine, it's medicine. You just, instead of using a phone or an email, you are connecting with video. So telemedicine and all the data you can get from telemedicine even, and use an AI algorithm to analyze that, and as you have your visit, you're analyzing many things on that particular patient. Putting all that together, how do you do that if you don't have the right infrastructure? But I'd say that we are in the right path, and a conference like this, again, is the right answer. And this conference happening every year or twice a year elsewhere, and having everyone here who connected and share cards or emails or Twitter handles, stay together and come up with real projects that become not just unicorns, but become real changers of human life. That's the important factor, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafael. So we have 2 questions and we're done because I think people here is hungry, so it's lunch coming. So wait for a second. And a short answer as well, please. So we'll go with you first.
Okay. This question is for Armando, Professor Armando. This actually is an unfair question, but well. The world is unfair. So I think you are in a very advantaged position where you are a professor here at the MIT, but also you work, I guess, as a visitor to the UNAM. So my question is basically, you saw the students there on the wild, in their environment. And also you see the UNAM, the processes that they have for training the students. So would you say that the processes or the education is different in any way, or it should be different, but is it a fundamental difference? also the students are fundamentally different from the students here in the MIT. And I'm saying that you are in a very specific position because it's very different to see students coming here because they are already filtered. So anyone who's coming from Latin America into MIT, Stanford, Harvard, or any other university is already filtered. But being there, do you see any difference? If not, my final question, and this is the unfair one because, well, actually it's your opinion. You mentioned that the university here at MIT is the engine, but it produces all this kind of development at the end. It's translated into a lot of, wealth. Somebody mentioned yesterday that it would be like the third economy, I think. But that is not translated. I'm assuming that the answer is going to be there is no difference. So why in Mexico you not translate that into that kind of wealth?
So I think that's probably a much longer conversation. Yeah. One of the things that I will say is I taught there the very same course that I'm going to teach here at MIT next semester. Same course except in Spanish. And I had several students in the course who did really, really well, and I think are at the level of the really good students here. I do think there is an ecosystem difference, for example, in the fact that some of the really good students there have to ride the bus for an hour and a half to get to university and an hour and a half to get back home. And here, most of my students live down the street in the dorm, for example, right? And it makes a big difference about the kind of involvement that you can have in the university environment. I think in terms of what is missing in the ecosystem to get to the kind of impact that you have here, I think one very big one is just scale, and in particular scale of the research enterprise. Research really benefits from network effects, and it really benefits from having a lot of really good researchers concentrated in one place. And I think that that is, if you compare the scale, for example, of number of researchers, research faculty here at the CSAIL department versus the number there, there's a big difference, and that has an impact.
Thank you.
Last question, please. And you have.
Yes. My name is Jovan Rebolledo. I'm from Mexico, living in Japan the last 15 years. My question is about leadership, specifically in these exponential technologies or deep tech, or if we want to even limit just AI. For instance, China wants to be the leader of AI in the world, and also Canada and US and many countries want to proclaim themselves to be the leaders. So thinking about Latin America, what would be the role of Latin America? Is it fair to think that Latin America has the chance to become a leader in AI? And what would it mean? Or should it be better to think that to become the leader of applying AI or deep tech or exponential technologies into real solutions in the world? What are your thoughts? And if you can also mix this with becoming kind of transformed into a new economic system that is needed in the world, that would be excellent.
You can jump in. Rafael.
I just really quick want to say that I think that the leader is not the one who creates the algorithm and who creates the fancy program or analytics or whatnot. The leader is the one who, again, the smart use of technology. The leader is the one who uses that to solve real life problems and do healthcare and not sick care, for example, right? And better education than the traditional education or the no education. I think that Latin America, absolutely, because of what we don't have, we are set to be the leaders in how to smartly use AI to solve real life problems. Absolutely. Latin America is the answer.
I think there is a window of opportunity here where there's a lot of change. You know, the companies that 15 years ago were considered the corporate behemoths, you know, Exxon, Walmart, are now, you know, tiny compared to companies that didn't exist back then. I think technology has a huge potential for disruption. But I don't think this window is going to be open forever. There are also forces that make the incumbents very strong. And in particular, when it comes to AI, when it comes to data and the value that data acquires in this kind of ecosystem, means that I think there's a huge opportunity now, but it's an opportunity that is not going to be open forever. And I think we really need to jump on it to actually be on the side that benefits from this technology and not like it happened in the last industrial revolution, on the side that ends up impoverished and losing all its resources to the winners in that competition.
It's a fight we are fighting since 2016 when Putin said who will govern AI will conquer the world. I mean, the idea is that I think you're right in saying that the window's opportunity is near, in a way, is straight. But as well, one thing that I keep on pushing is that we still don't have all the potential of AI explored. So there might be, because of the needs, of the peculiarity of the needs of Latin America, a possibility for Latin America to respond to technology to those needs with something that is not used nor explored in any other situation. And this might be the generative momentum for leadership of some sort. But the point of everything is that understanding whether your goal and objective is leadership or public value. And again, I think that in this sense, Latin America can teach others a bit more in terms of being culturally active in supporting technology that actually has a value for the public good.
Yes, Latin America focus on Latin America problems, not on leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good to that.
I'd like to add that if there is something that we have, and you know, from being from the region, in Latin America is challenges, right? And challenge-based education is now the trend, right? Like, but also something that Armando mentioned, resilience. When you have to take the bus 2 hours, no water, no electricity, and you solve problems, that's a powerful ingredient for innovation. Now, regarding leadership, we do have to work hard on precisely creating those structures that, you know, really allow us to take advantage of that, because otherwise we're still trapped in the corruption and this whole cycle that is very vicious, right?
Nice. Thank you so much, everyone.
Right. Thank you so much. Please thank our panelists.